He came home early that day, something he rarely did. A canceled meeting, an unexpected free hour, and a surprise in mind. He was going to take his wife and son out for ice cream. Just the three of them, like they used to before life got too busy, before things felt distant. But when he walked in, the house was too quiet. The kind of silence that tells you something is wrong before you even know what it is. He called her name once, then twice. No answer. That's when he heard the sound, a muffled laugh upstairs, followed by a hush, a door creaking shut. His heart raced, but not with suspicion. Not yet. He still believed in her. Still trusted that love didn't just disappear overnight. But what he saw when he opened that bedroom door shattered everything. His wife, in their bed, with his brother. He didn't scream, didn't even say a word. He just stood there, frozen in a silence so loud it could have cracked walls. They scrambled. His brother stuttered. His wife reached for a blanket. But none of that mattered. Because in that one moment, the foundation of everything he thought he knew collapsed. He left without looking back, drove for hours, slept in his car, cried in silence, screamed into nothing. But no amount of pain could erase what he saw. And worse, no amount of pain could answer the question that kept haunting him: how long? She tried to explain later. Said it was a mistake. Said it was just once. Said it meant nothing. But how do you believe someone who shattered your soul and shared your bed with your own blood? Still, he couldn't stop thinking about their son. A little boy with his eyes and her smile. A boy who laughed when he tossed him in the air, who called him daddy like it was the safest word in the world. That child was his anchor, his reason to stay grounded even when the world was falling apart. But then the doubts began to creep in. It started small. A comment from his mother. He doesn't look much like you, does he? A casual observation that dug deep. Then a memory. His wife avoiding conversations about dates. Her dodging questions during pregnancy, the timing. The silence. The fear. One night alone in the house while she stayed with her sister, he found the old paternity test kit they never used. He never thought he'd need it. Never imagined he'd be the kind of man who'd question his own blood. But pain makes you second-guess everything, even the things you once held sacred. He sent the swab, waited 3 weeks. And when the email came, it confirmed the truth. He wasn't the father. The betrayal in the bedroom was brutal, but the betrayal wrapped in diapers, lullabies, and bedtime stories. That one nearly ended him. He sat in the nursery that night, surrounded by stuffed animals and tiny shoes, and cried like a child himself. Not just because of what she did, but because he didn't know who he was anymore. He had loved that boy with everything he had, and now he didn't know if he was even allowed to. But love doesn't vanish with DNA, and pain doesn't make you stop caring. That little boy still reached for him when he cried, still called him daddy, still believed he was his protector, so he made a choice, not to forgive her, not yet, maybe not ever, but to stay present, to be the man he promised that child he'd be. Because betrayal cuts deep, but love, real love, doesn't break just because the truth hurts. Sometimes, the person who suffers the most isn't the one who lied, or even the one who was lied to. It's the innocent soul caught in the middle, still learning what love and trust are supposed to mean. And he wasn't going to be the reason that little boy grew up not knowing the difference. He sat alone in the car, hands still trembling on the steering wheel. The house behind him stood quiet, almost like it hadn't just betrayed him, like it wasn't the place where his life had collapsed in a single moment. He had only come home early to surprise them. A simple gesture, ice cream after school, maybe a movie later. Just something to remind them that he was still trying, still choosing his family over the chaos of work and pressure. But now, everything was upside down. He couldn't forget what he saw. His wife, his brother, in their bed, sheets tangled, her face flushed, not with love but guilt. His brother stammering, reaching for his pants, trying to say something that didn't matter. It all blurred into a frozen image burned into his mind. The betrayal wasn't just about sex. It was deeper than that. It was shared trust shattered. Family torn at the roots. He drove for hours that night. No direction. Just movement, like maybe if he kept going, the pain would fall off somewhere along the road. It didn't. He parked in a grocery store lot and stared into the dark. Questions spun in his head like a storm. How long? Why him? Did she ever love me? But no answer could fix what had already been broken. The next day, he didn't go home. He checked into a cheap motel. The wallpaper peeled and the lights flickered, but it was quiet. And he needed quiet. He stared at the ceiling, memories rushing through him like waves. Their wedding, their first home, the night their son was born. His tiny hand wrapped around his father's finger. The way she had looked at him, tired but full of love. Was it all a lie, or did it just stop being true? Then came the guilt, because no matter how hurt he was, he kept thinking about that little boy, his son. Or at least, the boy he had always believed was his. The child he had rocked to sleep, taught to ride a bike, kissed goodnight. The only reason he'd kept holding everything together for as long as he did. The only thing that still felt pure. But that thought became a knot in his stomach, a quiet whisper he couldn't shake. It had started a while ago. Off-hand comments from relatives, the way people said the boy looked more like his uncle. He had brushed it off. Kids change, he'd said. Genetics are strange. But now, in the aftermath of what he walked in on, everything suddenly seemed connected and terrifying. The next morning, he found the old DNA kit in the back of the closet. They'd bought it as a joke once, after a silly debate about eye color and family genes. He had never imagined he'd be holding it in shaking hands, terrified of the truth. But he took the swabs, sent them in, waited. Each day was like a slow bleed. He still hadn't confronted her. She tried to call, text, apologize, but he couldn't hear any of it. Not until he knew. Not until he had something solid in the middle of the emotional wreckage. Then the email came. He sat on the edge of the bed, heart thudding in his chest. He clicked the link, scrolled past the disclaimers, the charts, the jargon. Probability of paternity. 0.1%. He couldn't breathe. It wasn't just the affair. It was everything. The lies stretched so far back now, he couldn't tell where they started. The boy he had loved like his own wasn't. At least not by blood. And that truth broke something deeper than betrayal. He didn't cry. Not then. He just sat there, staring at the screen, feeling everything and nothing at once. His life hadn't just fallen apart. It had been built on something that was never real to begin with. And still, despite it all, his heart ached not for his wife, not for his brother, but for that little boy. The one who didn't know anything. The one who still waited by the door every night, hoping Daddy would come home. He walked into the house again for the first time in a week. It didn't feel like home anymore. Everything looked the same. The photos on the walls, the couch they used to curl up on, the toys scattered across the floor. But it all felt foreign now, like walking through a life that didn't belong to him. The silence was louder than it had ever been. The kind of silence that carries weight. Memory. Pain. His wife wasn't there. She had taken their son to her sister's for a few days, giving him space. Space he never asked for, but clearly needed. He wandered the rooms, barely touching anything. He ended up in his son's room. The walls were covered in little drawings. Rockets, animals, smiley faces. He stared at one in particular, a stick figure family. A man, a woman, a child. But there were two men, and only one had a smile. He felt the breath leave his body. It was such a simple drawing, and yet it carried so much weight, so much confusion. He knew now. Deep down he realized his son, the boy, must have known something too. Kids always do. Even when they can't explain it. They feel the tension. They hear the whispers behind closed doors. They see more than we think. Later that day, she came back. The moment their eyes met, there was no screaming, no fight, just a heavy quiet that hung between them like fog. She asked if they could talk. He nodded, but didn't say a word. She sat across from him at the kitchen table, the place where they had once laughed over morning coffee, where they had shared dreams and plans. Now it was just a place to survive the wreckage. She told him everything, that the affair wasn't new, that it had started during a rough patch in their marriage, that she had felt lost, confused, disconnected. She said his brother had been there for her, made her feel seen, listened to. It started small, conversations, then more, until it became something else entirely, something she couldn't stop, something she didn't want to. He didn't interrupt, he didn't yell, he just listened, because what else was there to say? Then she told him the truth about the child, that she had known, not with certainty, but with fear, that when she found out she was pregnant, she knew it could be either of them. But she chose not to test. She chose the lie, because it was easier, because she didn't want to destroy everything. But the lie had already done that. She started crying, breaking down into sobs. She said she was sorry, that she never meant to hurt him like this, that she loved him once, maybe still did. But he couldn't find those words inside himself anymore. They were buried too deep under betrayal. Then came the question he hadn't expected. What do we do now? It echoed in his mind long after she left the room. He looked around, at the walls they painted together, at the couch they picked out when money was tight, at the toys that were once gifts from his heart. What do we do now? The truth was, he didn't know. He still loved that boy. Blood or not, he had raised him, taught him how to tie his shoes, read bedtime stories, wiped away tears. None of that disappeared because of a DNA test. But the foundation had cracked, and everything that had stood on it was now trembling. He knew staying would be hard, but walking away would mean giving up something innocent in all of this. A child who still reached for him when he was scared, who still called him daddy. He wasn't ready to forgive. He wasn't ready to rebuild. But maybe, just maybe, he could still protect what mattered most. Not the marriage, not the lies, the child. That was the only real thing left. He watched the little boy sleep from the hallway, the soft glow of the nightlight casting gentle shadows across the room. The sound of his quiet breathing filled the silence, and for a moment, the pain in his chest softened. This was the part that hurt the most. Not the betrayal from his wife, not the stab of disloyalty from his own brother, but the innocence of this child caught in the crossfire of adult failure. That little boy had no idea that everything around him was falling apart. All he knew was love, safety, routine, and him, daddy. But was he still that? Could he still be? The DNA test said no. But the memories, the first steps, the first words, the way the boy ran to him after school, all screamed yes. That's what made everything so complicated, painful. Because no matter what the truth was, his heart didn't lie. He had loved that child like he was his own. He still did. And despite everything, the child still looked at him like he was his entire world. The next morning, he made breakfast like always. The boy climbed into his lap with sleepy eyes and messy hair, and wrapped his arms around his neck. "I missed you," he said. That was it. No explanation, no demand, just love. Pure, honest, unknowing love. He held him tightly, biting back tears. How could he walk away from that? Later that day, his wife came into the room. She looked like a ghost of herself. Tired, smaller somehow, almost afraid to speak. She sat down across from him and asked gently, "Are you going to leave?" He didn't answer right away. Not because he didn't know, but because the answer wasn't simple. If it were just about her, he might have left without looking back. The betrayal with his brother was a wound that would never fully close. But the boy, his boy, in every way that counted, that was where the real heartbreak lived. She began to cry again, whispering apologies that felt too late. She told him she didn't expect forgiveness, only understanding. She said she had failed them all, that she had broken the one thing she had taken for granted, trust. He told her the truth, that he didn't know if he could ever look at her the same way again. That every moment now felt like a lie dressed in old memories, that he felt like a stranger in his own life, but also that he didn't want the boy to suffer for their choices. She nodded through her tears. She didn't ask for more than that. The next few days passed quietly. No big decisions, no sudden moves, just small, careful steps around a house full of emotional landmines. The boy, unaware of the storm, laughed and played like always. And every time he called him daddy, it tore at something deep inside. He began to see a therapist, alone at first. He needed a space to understand the chaos inside him. The guilt, the grief, the anger, and slowly, he began to talk about the possibility of staying. Not for the marriage, but for the child. Not to pretend the betrayal hadn't happened, but to create something stronger out of the pieces. He wasn't ready to forgive, but he was beginning to understand that forgiveness wasn't always a gift you gave someone else. Sometimes it was a way to set yourself free. One night, the boy woke up from a nightmare and ran into his arms. He held him tightly, stroking his back until the sobs faded. "Don't leave me, Daddy," the boy whispered. "I'm right here," he said, voice breaking. "I'm not going anywhere." And in that moment, he realized that love, real love, isn't just about blood or promises. It's about showing up, again and again. Even when it hurts, even when your heart is broken, especially then.